A mother at my son's daycare. Became obsessed with my husband and started stalking us. She even moved into the building right next door and tried to get into our apartment. My husband, Marial, who is 34 and I 32, have been married for 6 years. We have a 3-year-old son named Everett. We live in a city where housing prices are incredibly high, so we felt lucky to find a decent apartment in a good neighborhood that also had a good daycare nearby. We enrolled Everett there last year, and until recently, everything had been going smoothly. Mariel and I really value our family time. We both have demanding jobs. I work in healthcare administration, and he's a civil engineer at a good firm. Despite how busy we are, we make an effort to drop off and pick up Everett together whenever possible. It's a special part of our family routine, giving us precious time together before we head off to our separate workdays. The daycare setting is pretty standard. Parents are usually in a hurry, coming and going quickly. Most barely exchange more than a quick nod or a brief hello. That's why Diana's behavior stood out right from the start. Diana has a daughter, Lee Blase, who is in Everett's class. I first noticed something a few months ago when she started looking at me strangely during the morning drop-offs. At first I wondered if I had something on my face, or if I had somehow accidentally offended her. I tried smiling and saying hello a few times, but she always gave me a cold stare or completely ignored me. After several attempts, I gave up and just focused on getting Everett settled. Things took a really strange turn about 2 months ago. Mariel had to handle dropping Everett off by himself one morning because I had an early meeting. That night, he came home with a bizarre story. Diana, who had never said a single word to me despite plenty of chances, had started a very enthusiastic conversation with him. In about 10 minutes, she apparently told him her whole life story, where she was from, where she went to college, details about her divorce, her husband left her for a coworker, and how unhappy she was with her job and where she lived. When Mariel mentioned he was a civil engineer, Diana acted like he was a celebrity. She asked him tons of questions about his firm and the projects he was working on. Mariel, being naturally kind and trying to be polite, mentioned that I had also gone to the same university around the same time as Diana, thinking it might help smooth over any issues she seemed to have with me. I just laughed and joked that Diana had basically speed-dated my husband right there in the daycare hallway. We didn't give it much more thought back then, just figuring she was a bit socially awkward. The following week, Mariel had to travel for a project presentation. I was in charge of dropping off and picking up Everett alone for 10 days. Every single day, Diana would somehow appear right next to me in the hallway or the waiting room. She still never spoke to me or even acknowledged I was there, but she would position herself close enough to listen in on my conversations with teachers or other parents. Several times, I caught her leaning in slightly when I was talking to another mom about weekend plans or kid activities. Her behavior was so strange that I brought it up to Mariel during our nightly calls. He also found it really odd that Diana didn't even try to talk to me, especially after how quickly she had struck up a conversation with him. When Mariel returned from his trip, we went back to our usual routine of dropping Everett off together. 3 days after he was back, Diana walked into the classroom while Mariel was helping Everett adjust his backpack at his cubby. I was across the room helping Everett get his coat on. Diana walked right up to Mariel, grabbed his arm, and excitedly asked how his trip had been and if he was happy to be back. Mariel was surprised by her familiarity and immediately pointed at me and introduced us properly. Diana looked at me with a strange expression and said she remembered seeing me at an alumni event months ago. This was a complete lie, not only because we saw each other regularly at daycare, but also because I hadn't been to an alumni event in years. From that day on, Diana's behavior became even bolder. When Mariel and I arrived at daycare together, she would greet him with obvious excitement while totally ignoring me, even when it was clear we were together, often holding hands or with Mariel's arm around my shoulder. Several times, she would linger near the door at pickup time, clearly waiting for a chance to talk to Mariel alone. Mariel quickly noticed her behavior and started actively avoiding her. He would either pretend not to see her or just give a quick, polite nod before walking away. He told me he found her behavior towards me disrespectful of our marriage and that he didn't want anything to do with her. Despite Mariel's clear lack of interest, Diana kept persisting. The situation started to really affect my enjoyment of our family routine. I'd find myself scanning the hallway for her when we arrived, feeling tense when I saw her, and rushing to get Everett settled just to avoid another awkward encounter. One afternoon, while chatting with another mom during pickup about an upcoming birthday party, I happened to mention our address so we could coordinate carpooling. Diana was sitting at a nearby table, pretending to help her daughter with an art project, but I saw her head tilt slightly in our direction when I said our street name. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. A month later, I was walking with Everett to the park near our apartment when I saw Diana and her daughter coming out of the building right next door to ours. I stopped dead in my tracks, and Diana saw me. For a moment, she looked just as surprised as I was, but then she quickly turned around and hurried off in the opposite direction. When I told Mariel about seeing her, he called the leasing office for our building, which manages the building next door as well, and put it on speakerphone. The manager confirmed that Diana had moved into the adjacent building 3 weeks earlier. The timing seemed way too coincidental to ignore. The frequency of seeing her increased dramatically after that. Now, I saw Diana almost every day in our neighborhood, at the supermarket, the coffee shop, the park. Each time, she completely ignored me while making obvious efforts to position herself where Mariel would see her if he was with us. Things really came to a head last month. One morning, Diana approached Mariel outside our building as he was carrying Everett to daycare. I had gone back upstairs to grab a lunchbox I'd forgotten and watched from the window as Diana tried to strike up a conversation with Mariel. Even from a distance, I could see Mariel's body language was tense and uncomfortable. When I came back downstairs with the lunchbox, Diana quickly stepped away, but not before I overheard her suggest a weekend play date with just him and the kids. Mariel immediately told her that any play date would have to be arranged through me. Diana never followed up. That night, Mariel and I had a long conversation about the whole situation. We both felt that Diana's behavior had crossed the line from just annoying to genuinely worrying. The fact that she had moved so close to us right after hearing our address, combined with her constant attempts to interact with Mariel while completely ignoring me, raised serious red flags. We decided it was time to address the situation directly. The next morning, when we saw Diana, Mariel calmly told her that I wanted to talk to her. When Diana acted surprised, he added that her pattern of ignoring me while seeking his attention was obvious and disrespectful. I then stepped forward and told Diana directly that her behavior was inappropriate and asked her to keep her distance from our family. I told her pointedly that a daycare was not a place for dating and that her actions were making us uncomfortable. Diana looked surprised. She claimed there had been a misunderstanding and that she had just happened to be walking with Mariel to his office one day after a chance meeting. When I mentioned this to Mariel later, he clarified that he had only walked in the same direction for about a block after leaving daycare before saying goodbye and heading towards his office. He said he would never take a stranger to his workplace and had simply been trying to be polite during their brief walk together. A few days after our confrontation, Diana approached us during pickup, saying she wanted to talk. Mariel excused himself, saying he needed to focus on Everett. I spoke with Diana briefly. She angrily told me that we wouldn't be friends. Coming from someone who had never made the slightest effort to be friendly to me in the first place, the statement felt completely absurd. I simply thanked her for letting me know and walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth open. The current situation remains tense. Diana still lives in the building next to ours, and her daughter continues to attend Everett's daycare. Mariel and I regularly talk about the possibility of moving now, something we had considered before, but now feels much more urgent. We've also informed the daycare director about the situation and provided documentation of Diana's behavior. Several friends have suggested that Diana's actions resemble stalking, which frankly terrified us. We've started taking precautions like varying our routes, being more careful about sharing any personal information, and keeping detailed records of every interaction with Diana. The daycare Christmas party is coming up next week, and based on last year's event, where Diana showed up in an inappropriately revealing outfit and spent the night trying to talk to other children's parents, we're dreading another awkward encounter. I never imagined I'd be dealing with something like this in my 30s, especially not in the context of raising my son. Has anyone else been through a similar situation? Any advice on how to handle this going forward would be really appreciated. I just want to protect my family and get back our peace of mind without making things worse. Update 1. The daycare Christmas party turned out to be even more awkward than we had anticipated. Diana showed up in a tight red dress that seemed much more suitable for a cocktail party than a children's event. Throughout the night, she positioned herself everywhere Mariel went, even following him to the refreshment table when he went to get a cookie for Everett. Mariel stayed close by me the whole time, making it obvious that we were a unit. What happened next was unexpected. Another parent from the daycare, Brian, came up to us during the party and asked if Diana had been bothering us. Brian revealed that Diana had displayed similar behavior towards him the previous year when his wife was away dealing with a health problem. According to Brian, Diana repeatedly sought him out, ignored his wife on the few occasions she was present, and even suggested outings just for single parents. His situation stopped when his wife recovered and started attending school events regularly again. It became clear to us that Diana's behavior wasn't new, but unlike with Brian, her obsession continued despite my presence. It turned out this wasn't new either, because Brian introduced us to two other couples who had experienced similar things with Diana. One mom mentioned that Diana had even shown up at her husband's workplace by chance after hearing him mention it during a school event. With all this new information, we arranged a meeting with the daycare director. The following week, we brought Brian in. He had already mentioned Diana's behavior to the director before, but was told it was a personal matter between parents. Now, with several families reporting similar concerns, the director agreed to monitor the situation more closely and make sure Diana was never assigned to volunteer shifts alongside Mariel or the other affected parents. For about 3 weeks after that meeting, Diana seemed to calm down. She stopped waiting around at pickup times and kept her distance at events. We thought maybe the increased supervision by the daycare staff was having an impact. Then, one evening in late January, I was working late, and Mariel picked up Everett. When they didn't get home at the usual time, I texted Mariel. He called me right away, sounding stressed. He explained that Diana had followed him and Everett home from daycare, first walking behind them, then driving ahead, rolling down her window, and offering them a ride home because it looked like it was going to rain. Mariel firmly refused the offer and took a detour to a public place, a busy cafe, until he was sure Diana had left. We decided to file a police report. The officer who took our statement explained that while Diana's behavior was concerning, it still didn't meet the legal definition of stalking in our state. It felt ridiculous, like the threshold is only met if she's chasing you around dressed as a clown with a knife. The situation escalated again in February when Diana somehow got Mariel's work email address and sent him several messages asking for his professional opinion on some personal hobby projects. The emails included photos of the inside of her apartment with some strange models and requests for Mariel to come to her house to give her advice. Mariel forwarded the emails to his company's human resources department and only replied once with a firm message asking her not to contact him again about anything unrelated to the daycare. During this time, we also noticed Diana frequently appearing at places we used to visit regularly. Our usual supermarket, the coffee shop where Mariel often worked on weekend mornings, and even the running trail I used several times a week. Every time she acted surprised to see us, claiming she had just discovered these places recently. The most disturbing incident happened in early March. Mariel and I attended a benefit dinner for Everett's daycare at a local restaurant. The event was for adults only and required tickets bought weeks in advance. In the middle of the evening, Diana showed up, saying she had just decided to support the school, even though she hadn't confirmed her attendance or bought a ticket beforehand. She spent the entire night trying to insert herself into Mariel's conversations, complimenting his suit and asking about his current projects. What really worried us happened when we were leaving. Diana approached Mariel while I was gathering our coats and slipped a note into his pocket. Mariel didn't notice it until we got home. The note contained Diana's phone number and a message that read, "Life is short. Seize what could be. She doesn't have to know." Mariel showed me the note immediately, and we agreed that this had absolutely crossed a definitive line. The next day, we went back to the police station with the note, the email, evidence, and the security footage. The officer who had taken our original report agreed that Diana's behavior had escalated to harassment and helped us file for a temporary restraining order. The court granted the order, requiring Diana to stay at least 30 meters away from us, our home, and Mariel's workplace. The order didn't stop her from taking her daughter to daycare, but it specifically said she had to avoid contact with us during drop-off and pickup times. When Diana was served with the restraining order, she apparently became hysterical. She thought we were trying to ruin her life with what we were doing. She told the person serving the order that Mariel had seduced her and given her signs that he was interested, a total lie that Mariel flatly denied. The day after Diana received the restraining order, the daycare director called us. Diana had contacted the school, claiming that we were bullying and attacking her. The director, now fully aware of the entire situation, assured us that the school supported our actions and would work to make sure the restraining order was followed on the daycare premises. We are currently in a tense waiting situation. Diana has technically complied with the restraining order, but we still see her because she lives next door, and that isn't covered by the order. Apparently, she started dropping her daughter off at daycare much earlier than necessary, presumably to avoid running into us. The whole situation has put a considerable strain on our family. Everett has asked us several times why the girl's mom seems angry with us. We've tried to explain it to him in a way he can understand, at his age, talking about how adults sometimes have disagreements, but it's hard to completely shield him from what's happening. We are now actively looking for a house with the hope of moving before the next school year starts. In the meantime, we are documenting every potential violation of the restraining order and keeping in close communication with the daycare staff. I never imagined that a simple routine of dropping my son off at school would turn into this level of stress and worry. We're trying hard to maintain normalcy for Everett's sake, but the constant feeling of being watched is exhausting. I'll update again if there are any major developments. Update 2. A little over a month after we got the restraining order, we noticed that Diana had stopped showing up in our neighborhood altogether. Her daughter continued attending daycare, but Diana's mother started doing the drop-offs and pickups instead. We cautiously hoped that this meant Diana had finally gotten the message. At the end of April, we got a call from the daycare director informing us that Diana had withdrawn her daughter from the nursery, saying it was due to a hostile environment. Although we felt terrible for the girl, who had made friends and was well adjusted to her routine, we couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. About 2 weeks after Diana's daughter left the daycare, Mariel came home from work visibly shaken. A colleague had shown him a social media post by Diana that contained references to our situation. Although it didn't mention us by name, the post described a handsome married civil engineer who had been friendly to her before his jealous wife intervened. The post claimed they had shared meaningful conversations and emotional connections that his wife had misinterpreted. It included vague details about our neighborhood and Everett's daycare that would have been recognizable to anyone who knew us. Several of Diana's friends commented on the post, offering sympathy and suggesting that the wife was clearly insecure and felt threatened by her. Mariel immediately contacted our lawyer, who advised us to take screenshots of everything but not to interact with the post. The post, while inappropriate, did not technically violate the restraining order since it didn't involve direct contact. Things took another turn when I received a friend request on social media from a name I didn't recognize. As a precaution, I checked the profile before rejecting it and discovered it belonged to Diana's ex-husband. After consulting with Mariel and our lawyer, I accepted the request. This was quickly followed by a message stating that he thought he could help us with our situation. He asked us to meet in person to discuss things. Thomas turned out to be a calm man who seemed genuinely concerned about what was happening. He explained that Diana had shown similar obsessive behavior towards him during their marriage, often fixating on male colleagues or friends. According to Thomas, Diana's fixations often lasted for several months before she moved on to someone new. The most surprising revelation came when Thomas shared that Diana's pattern of moving closer to the people she fixated on was familiar to him. After their separation, but before their divorce was final, Diana had rented an apartment in the same building as a male colleague he suspected she was interested in. When that didn't work out, she moved into a house on the same street as her therapist, whom she had also become obsessed with. Thomas explained that he had contacted us because Diana had recently reached out to him, asking to reconcile. During their conversation, she mentioned being forced to leave her apartment because of harassment from neighbors. Thomas connected the dots based on the details Diana shared, and with some research involving his stepdaughter's daycare, he was able to find us. Yes, her daughter is not his daughter, which is why he doesn't have custody. Thomas also shared that Diana had been diagnosed with erotomania. When I looked it up, I discovered it's a psychiatric and delusional condition that causes a person to believe that someone else is in love with them, even when it's not true. She had been receiving treatment for it from her therapist until she started obsessing over him and stalking him. With this new information, we went back to court to request that the temporary restraining order be made permanent. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, including the statement from the shooting and the therapist's statement, granted our request and expanded the order to include prohibitions on any mention of us on social media. Translator's note. The reference to the statement from the shooting appears in the original text, though its relevance is unclear from the narrative. Just when we thought the situation might finally be improving, our real estate agent called us with some bad news. We had finally found a new home and listed our apartment, and while showing it to potential buyers, the agent discovered that someone had accessed our property without authorization. Nothing was stolen, but several items had been moved around, and a framed photo of Mariel and Everett was missing from the living room. We immediately suspected Diana and contacted the police. Patrols in our area were increased as a result. These increased patrols proved valuable just 3 days later when Diana was caught trying to get into the back entrance of our building at 2 a.m. Police arrested her for violating the restraining order and attempted burglary. Diana spent 2 nights in jail before being released on bail with an electronic bracelet and strict conditions, including a mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment. Her lawyer argued that she was experiencing a mental health crisis and needed help rather than punishment. We have since moved to our new house in a different neighborhood and enrolled Everett in a new daycare for the upcoming school year. We've taken extensive precautions with our new address, making sure it doesn't appear in public records and instructing friends and family not to share our location with anyone. The most recent development happened last week when Diana's attorney contacted ours with a settlement offer. In exchange for us not pursuing civil charges for harassment and emotional distress, Diana would agree to receive ongoing psychiatric treatment, move to another state where her sister lives, and have absolutely no contact with our family in any way. After a lot of discussion, we have tentatively agreed to these terms, provided that strong legal safeguards are put in place to ensure her compliance. Our main goal has always been to protect our son and get our peace of mind back. We are cautiously optimistic that this difficult chapter is finally closing, but we remain vigilant. It's hard to imagine that someone as unbalanced as Diana could truly get her life back on track. Update 3. The agreement with Diana was finalized about 5 months ago. She moved to live near her sister, entered an intensive psychiatric treatment program, and has maintained no contact with us. Diana's attorney provides monthly updates to our lawyer, confirming that she is complying with the terms of our agreement. As long as she doesn't violate them, we won't take legal action, but if she does, we can act fairly quickly. Those are the conditions we agreed upon. According to these updates, Diana has been diagnosed with several mental health conditions, in addition to the erotomania her ex-husband mentioned. She is reportedly responding well to treatment and medication, and her sister reports significant improvement in her behavior and thinking patterns. Our new home has truly become the sanctuary we had hoped for. It's in a gated community with good security and is about 30 minutes away from our previous neighborhood. Everett has adjusted well to his new daycare and has already made several friends. We've been careful not to share personal information with other parents there, although that level of caution will likely stay with us for many years to come. Marial's firm was very understanding of the situation and allowed him to work remotely for several weeks during our move and transition. His colleagues have been supportive, and the incident involving Diana's social media post has been largely forgotten at work. We did have a little scare about 2 months ago when a woman who looked like Diana was spotted near Everett's new daycare. After reviewing security footage, we confirmed it wasn't her, just someone with a similar appearance. Now, every time we see that same haircut, it makes us think of Diana. The officer who handled our case still checks in periodically. He advised us to maintain our security measures for at least a year, even with Diana living out of state. That's why we have cameras around our property and are still careful with our online presence. Everett thankfully seems to have processed the changes in his life without any significant trauma. From time to time, he asks about his old friends from his previous daycare, but he no longer mentions Diana or her daughter. That was one of the things that worried us the most, but since he's so young, he moves on from one thing to the next very easily. For anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, my advice is simple. Trust your instincts. If someone's behavior feels wrong or makes you uncomfortable, it's probably problematic. Document everything. Inform the authorities early on, even if they can't take immediate action. Build a support network of friends, family, and professionals who understand what you're experiencing. We were fortunate to have resources that many people don't: the ability to relocate, access to legal representation, supportive employers, and a strong community around us. We recognize this privilege and are committed to helping others who might face similar situations with fewer resources. As for Diana, I've worked hard to let go of my resentment towards her. Mental health is complex, and while it absolutely doesn't excuse harmful behaviors, understanding it can help explain them. I truly hope she continues to get the help she needs and is able to rebuild her life in a healthier direction. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice throughout this nightmare. It meant more than you can imagine. Update 4. Diana has become obsessed with my husband again. We don't know why she fixated on him again, because up until now, she usually moved on to another obsession after several months. But after a few months of attending therapy and taking her medication, she stopped. When her sister found out, she tried to reason with Diana, but Diana ended up running away. Her sister contacted Diana's lawyer, and that lawyer warned us about what could happen. Our lawyer also warned us that we could take legal action now. We waited a week after getting the notice to give the sister time to find her and get her back into treatment. But instead, we found out Diana had come back to town and was hanging around our old neighborhood. She was trying to find out everything, including which daycare we were taking Everett to, but no one told her anything because they either didn't know or had been warned. A neighbor contacted us and told us what was happening, and that was enough for us to start a legal process against her. She even tried to go to Mariel's work, but she just watched from the outside, or at least that's what we were told, that someone who looked like Diana was outside for a while, but she didn't actually do anything. Mariel made sure not to be seen when he left work that day. In any case, the company has strict instructions not to let her in. The process was swift, and we were able to sue her and initiate criminal proceedings against her, all in record time because she had agreed not to target us and to continue receiving treatment. She didn't, and we did what we had to do. All her trials took no more than about 2 months each and happened almost in parallel. She was taken into police custody as soon as our lawyer informed the authorities, and the lawsuit process began. The lawsuit took a bit longer, but we were eventually awarded compensation from her, which the judge ordered to be taken from some of her property. While she was living with her sister, she wasn't working, but she still had a car and some money saved, even though she was functionally unemployed while living here. Another judge then ordered her to be sent to an institution where she would receive treatment and help for her condition. This way, even if she decides unilaterally that she doesn't want treatment, at least she won't be able to escape and try something with us or someone else. It's not like she can avoid treatment in there anyway. It's not like she has anywhere to escape to. It's not a maximum security prison, but she's not free to do whatever she wants either. I sincerely hope this is the last time I have to write here. At least she now has several years she will be required to stay in the institution, and her release will depend on her willingness to stay in treatment and recover. But at least we know it will be for a while. She might start bothering new people in there, but that's not our problem anymore. Unless she starts stalking imaginary people, which makes her even more unstable than before, and then she somehow escapes and goes on a crime spree. But from what we understand, as long as a person with this condition and other existing ones chooses to be treated, they can return to a normal life. For those who asked about her daughter, we honestly don't know. Maybe she's living with Diana's sister, or maybe she's staying with her biological father. We don't know that part of her story. I'll say goodbye now, and I hope I never have to come back here.